These are the slides for increasing learning using textbook guides, as according to inclusion strategies for secondary classroom teachers. Study guides are explicit and structured cognitive frameworks that help motivate students to read textbooks and assist them in focusing their attention on what the teacher considers most important. There's a number of benefits to this, and Lovett and Horton in 1994 stated that there are some specific benefits to doing study guides, that they modify only material that has proven difficult for students or that clearly lacks organization. They can collaborate with other teachers to create materials and co-teach with special education teachers and solicit their assistance in creating study guides. One of the keys to study guides is the main idea text structure. It was basically one of the different styles of study guides. This is characterized by a passage that focuses on a single idea, and there's usually some keywords that go along with this main idea, such as principles and laws or definitions. And it's basically a study guide that really focuses on the main idea of the text. And this could be a foundation to a beneficial way of studying by providing the main idea and maybe 3 or more supporting details afterwards, perhaps. And there was an experiment done by Horton and Lovett in 1989 that compared the effectiveness of self-study and study guide methods. The mean score from students using study guides was 93%, while that from self-study was 80%. And for ELNs, the average test score was 68% using study guides and 49% for just self-study. So it's pretty clear that study guides that use this main idea text structure are probably much more beneficial, especially for ELNs as well, who need additional help. But there's a number of benefits to using these study guides. Frustration is decreased when students know exactly what the teacher considers most important. The perception is enhanced because of the use of the 3 modalities. Discrimination is ensured because the students do not have to try to discriminate between essential and non-essential information in the text. The whole main idea point of the study guide kind of does that for them by giving them the main idea. And then confusion is decreased because the important information is clearly delineated in the guide. And another type of study guide is the list text structure study guide. And Kamalski, Saunders, and Lentz explained that understanding a text means constructing an accurate mental representations of the text. List structure itself is based on the use of things like semicolons, numbers, and letters in parentheses. And this kind of structure could be most difficult to learn in some ways, but also really helps show the students learn how to organize the material that they're learning in a well-structured way according to what category it belongs into and so on. An example of this could be seen in the little picture on the right, which is just a basic little outline for writing a research paper, but as can be seen by different, Roman numerals and letters and numbers and lowercase letters, it shows how things are formatted in a very coherent way in a list structure. There's a lot of benefits to this, but again, it could be somewhat more confusing to get down packed at first. Key 44 in study guides is the order text structure study guide. And when teachers are presented with insensitive text, or textbooks that are basically confusing for ELN students and students who have difficulty, they come up with some alternative teaching strategies that help determine different things, such as which strategy best communicates the target information, why use that strategy, how to use that strategy, and when and where to use it, as well as how to evaluate its effectiveness. And as an example of one study, in 2007, Steele realized that using easier textbooks or historical fiction or information from the internet can be more productive for students with ELN than using the textbooks, especially those textbooks who might be too wordy or insensitive to young learning minds. And although she also stated that if schools still wish to use these textbooks, it would be less difficult if they just included some effective study guides with them, and that would probably take care of the problem as well. So in some ways, the order text structure study guide is just really well formatted with either using other resources to have less of a focus on the confusing textbooks, or to use the textbooks but just use them with a study guide or with something else to help make it less confusing. Key 45 is the compare and contrast text structure study guide. Comparing and contrasting the textbook material is a great way for students to be able to navigate their way through the text. In 1991, Wyatt and Hayes compared two different types of comparing and contrasting, one where students compared a religion that was similar to another, and another where students compared a religion to one that was highly different. When asked to recite facts they remember, they made more correct responses for the set of religions that were highly different rather than the similar ones. And this shows how the concepts used in compare and contrast models should be very dissimilar. So that basically just states insightfully that perhaps there's a better usage for compare and contrast test structure when it's going to compare and contrast two things that are very different to begin with, and that it might be less beneficial and less understandable for students when you're comparing things that are really, really similar. In this example of the religions, it might have been more confusing to compare Christianity with Judaism, and it would have probably been a little bit easier for students to come up with comparing and contrasting structures for, I don't know, comparing Christianity with Hinduism. Key 46 is a cause and effects text structure study guide. These types of text strategies can typically be difficult because it relies on the student's ability to see how one event causes the next one, or a group for that matter. The tricky thing about this strategy is that usually the material that the cause and effect is based on is usually verbal information the teacher gives in class anyways. A lot of times she might try to get the student's understanding while in the lecture in the classroom by verbally just coming up with something to compare something, or coming up with something to cause and affect something with the topic being considered. So usually it just relies a lot on students' memory of in-class lectures. But an example of an effectiveness of this cause and effect can be shown in the video link provided in this slide, where it's a quick 4-minute video about a teacher just comparing the cause and effect behind how much air is inside of a balloon and how far the balloon travels when it's released between someone's fingers. Key 47 is the problem solution study guide. This section basically really mostly goes over just the importance of going over text structure than anything else. Problem solution study guide being one of those types of text structure. In this case, it's a study guide where there's a list of problems, such as the one in the picture below for a physics study guide, and the solutions are all written and explained underneath the problems themselves. So, typically these wouldn't be very beneficial for students if the exams are going to be the exact same questions, but typically they're very beneficial for students if the exams are different questions, but based on the same concepts and same content. And in 1997, Talbot explicitly taught half of 244 Chinese students the macrostructure of comparison and contrast, cause and effect, and problem solution text, which are all just different text study guide styles. And they did much better on exams than those who did not go over the text structure. So that shows how understanding text structure is really important for ELNs and just people learning in general. And the last slide, Key 48, goes over the analogy study guide. The analogy is very beneficial, and Bean, Singer, and Cohen explained that an analogy study guide is especially helpful in assisting students to understand complex or unfamiliar material. It allows them to connect foreign, unknown concepts to ones that are well known to them. Hayes did an experiment in 1986 to compare the effectiveness between using analogies and not with 52 11th grade students. Both groups were very successful, but the ones who used analogies to baseball were even more successful. And researchers have concluded that supplementing text analogies with explicit guide material in the form of an analogical study guide will further assist students' understanding of difficult concepts. Taking the additional step of supplying a pictorial representation of the analogy will significantly advance students' comprehension beyond the level that might be supplied with the use of an analogical guide alone. So these are just basically a few different styles of using a textbook as a guide instead of just basing your learning off of reading a textbook, but rather being more creative with it, using things like cause and effect or analogies or compare and contrast, or just problem solution as well, and just taking the textbook and really being creative with it and trying to find ways to help students study that will make more sense to them and not be so overwhelming. So, yeah. Thank you.